Hello, everybody. This is Hannah Trueblood, and I am here with a pretty interesting fella tonight on Conversations. It is the first Monday of the month, and that is my slot on WVLP 103.1. This interesting person that I speak of is the great, not late, Nick Rapley.
Thanks. I'm not dead, and I was on time.
Yeah.
Thank you for the very kind introduction.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I think this is going to be a really great chat. This has been on the books for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So, amazing. So let's just get right into it, Nick.
Okay.
Tell the people who you are, where you come from.
Who am I?
What is your story?
My story.
That you want to tell tonight?
Well, I suppose there's the story I want to tell, and there's the truth. Let's do. So I was born in Valpo. I've been here pretty much my entire life, with the exception of post-college. I moved away for a bit, but my whole family's been here. It's always been a thing. And then after college, I moved to New York for a while, and then came back, and so it brings us to this point. As far as who am I? Well, I'm a guy that enjoys playing a lot of musical instruments. I enjoy painting. I enjoy just trying to live a decent life of being a pretty chill person. I think that's the gist of it. I think
It's working so far.
Cool.
I would say the chill meter is pretty chill.
Pretty chill.
Pretty chill. So you play a myriad of instruments, but your main your instrument of choice is the drums.
Yeah.
How did you pick up the sticks?
So my mother is to blame for that. So she had my aunt and my mom in the basement. So this is gonna be a huge full circle story. But basically, when they were growing up, my aunt had a band in the basement, and so my mom wasn't in the band, but she was wanted to play drums, so she would jam and sit in when their drummer couldn't make it. So it was this all-girl band in the 60s, really kind of a cool thing. So when I was a kid, in the crawl space, my mom's old drum set was kind of tucked away under there, and I used to find it and bang on it a bunch. And I wanted to learn guitar, but Mom said, I have drums, so you're going to learn drums. And so that started, and that was probably around, I want to say 8 or 9 years old maybe. I was really into martial arts before that, and then I went to class, and the place was closed. It was building was for rent.
Womp womp.
So then I started picking up drums.
There you go.
Yeah.
Amazing. So are you self-taught, or did you take lessons?
No, I mean I took lessons for a little bit right out of the gate at Front Porch Music. Hurrah!
Shout out to
Front Porch. What's up, y'all? And then after I think a month or two, my mom was like, "You're not practicing. You got to quit." So, and then in that time, I started meeting other people who were drummers that were much older, and just kind of watching what they were doing and learning from them. And by the time middle school came around and band was a thing, I got back into drum lessons then. And then I remember my late drum teacher, now Herb Hedstrom, what a guy. But we normally only were supposed to get a half an hour lesson to split between timpani and marimba and all that, and he could just tell that I didn't care about those things. So he gave me an hour lesson, and we dedicated it to drum set. So
nice.
I owe him a lot as far as encouraging me to kind of go after what I wanted to, as opposed to the status quo.
That's a fantastic segue into kind of your next little area of your life. You kind of go through school, you deal with the drums, you're getting into it, and then college.
Oh, college, yeah. So I did not want to go to college at all. I had no interest. But my dad was like, okay, you have to go to school. And if you go to an in-state school, we will pay for it. And I was like, okay. Well, then I was strictly looking at Indiana stuff. So I wound up at Ball State. And prior to that, I had gotten really, when I was 14 or 15, I got really into recording stuff. And it was mainly just because there wasn't, at my age, a lot of people that were playing music around. So I kind of learned guitar and bass and stuff like that. So I wanted to get used to being my own band, so to speak. So that's where I started getting into recording. And then when I realized I had to go to college, I was like, well, I might as well do something music related. And I did a semester as a music student, but the conservatory way of doing things wasn't really my jam. And I remember having to do 4 ensembles, and that met every night, and got 1 credit hour for it.
Nice. And
then as a freshman, I wasn't allowed on the drum line, so I was a water boy. And I was kind of just not vibing. So then then through telecommunications, there was a recording program, so I kind of went through, and that was college. But also in college, I met a guy who So I had the girl I was dating at the time wanted me to do a drum solo at this. It was like BSU late night. So it was like basically if you were underage or were like not into drinking, which was not many, but
Like 2 people.
sure. So anyway, so she like convinced me to lug my drums across campus and go do this thing. And so I played a drum solo. But the guy that went before me did a Jeff Buckley cover and like absolutely destroyed it. And it was kind of scary. But anyway, after the thing was over, he was like, "Hey man, your playing reminded me of a friend that I had that passed away last year. And I just, is there something we can do together?" And I was like, "I don't know, man." And so he asked me about this musical, and I was like, if I wanted to be a part of this project that was writing a musical. And at the time I had zero interest. I'm like, that's not really. And I asked him about singing in my band, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm kind of busy." So we missed each other for a second, but then as fate would have it, we came back together, and I became the dude writing percussion arrangements for this musical. And it was an immersive learning project that got way out of hand, and it was like in Playbill and all this other stuff. So we ended up moving to New York after school to be a part of that. And then that's where like all the craziness ensues.
Wow. And just think, none of that would have happened, or at least not in that order, or at least not with that guy, if your dad hadn't have said, "You better get your butt to school."
Yeah, that's the thing. It's really interesting, the path that life takes, and even it's sometimes the things you don't want to do that take you somewhere that you didn't expect you wanted to be.
Right. And then it works out like it was all meant to be.
Yeah, ideally.
Is. Awesome.
Can't avoid that.
So you're doing all this incredible production for this immersive learning experience that got out of hand and ended up like pretty legitimate. And now you've graduated college and you have left to go to New York.
Yes.
What was that like? Like going from, Valparaiso in terms of like towns, it's like a nice sized city, but it's obviously like the size of like one neighborhood in New York. So what was that experience like?
It was incredibly exciting. I just think my first apartment was in like a real shady part of Bedford Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. And at the time that I was there, I think it would have been 2011. Our place there was like a row of tiles in the shower that popped out that cockroaches were crawling out of. And I remember my roommate at one point, who was the same guy, jumped out of the shower butt naked, covered in suds, screaming about, said it was going to eat him or something, but it was a cockroach on the curtain rod.
Oh no.
And then I remember we had like a whole bunch of mice too. And like, it would suck because they were like really, like they were kind of cute, but it'd be like 2:00 in the afternoon and one would come crawling up on my desk and look at me. I'm like, okay, you guys are getting a little too comfortable. So, but we didn't care, we were living in New York, so it was cool.
That was the NYC lifestyle,
yeah,
right?
and it's everything. It's like, I don't know, coming from a place like this, it seems like all the stuff that you were reading about or watching about, this was all real and it was all tangible and you could do all of it. So I can't imagine. I know there's some kids that go to college in New York, and I think if I was ever in that, I don't think I would have made it out alive. But it was cool. Like living there is very compressed. It feels like, so it's in the sense that your highs and lows are sandwiched so close together where, I don't know, you could have like the best morning of your life and then the evening would just ruin your whole everything. Just New York could put you on a cloud or just throw you in the gutter in a second. And a huge cross section of diversity of people, like the things that I don't know, things that seem so apparent there are things that I don't think a lot of folks even consider here. And I think it's just a difference of environment, but a huge wide cross section of just like United States population of like types of people and different like just everything. So that was always very, very fascinating to me to feel like I was, instead of coming from a place of here and being like everyone's pretty, it's large type of demographic, to being a minority was kind of a good experience. And I kind of was, it was humbling in a number of ways to think about. So,
yeah, I know. I attribute kind of my worldview to, I grew up in one of the only truly like diversified neighborhoods in Valpo, which is here, the Hill. I grew up on the Hill. And so to be able to have neighbors of all kinds, and to really like, I was kind of the minority on the block. And so that kind of shaped my worldview to experience life and people a little bit differently than many other people who come from a we'll say predominantly white,
Sure.
suburban neighborhood like Valpo. And
Totally.
so I can imagine the culture shock of, going to that. I mean, and even Ball
Sure.
State, there probably was a little bit, but
No.
I don't know much of their international reach.
No, I think some of my Ball State times was just with my worldview and my mentality are probably some of my most embarrassing in
Really?
terms of just the way that I looked at things, or I don't know, things that I thought was funny. It's like, I'm like, wow.
Wow. We won't talk about that. That's okay.
Thanks.
We'll go back to New York when you were humbled in a good way and your worldview expanded.
Yeah.
So what were some of your favorite things about New York?
Just the accessibility. I just felt like musically there's this feeling of community that no matter what tier somebody was on, if somebody had already, like, I don't know, just the community was so welcoming and in a lot of ways incestuous too. Like if I was playing in a band with this group of guys and or gals, and there was another one over here, there's a good chance that members from this band would be playing in that one also. So everybody was always kind of filtering in and out, and you'd run into the same people a lot. It was like a small world in a big place, and once you've made your friends, like, there were always more from that. So it was really cool to see how collaborative people were in that regard. And then just, again, the accessibility to anything. Any night you wanted to do something, there was something incredible you could experience. Or stumbling into a neighborhood you'd never been to and just walking around. I'll never forget the first time that I was in like the Hasidic neighborhood in Williamsburg. I didn't know anything about any of that prior to moving there. So I remember just getting on a train and being like, okay, somebody said Williamsburg's cool. Let me get out. And I got off just right in the middle of it. And like all the buildings, like everything is written in Hebrew, and it's the hats, the curls, the whole nine, everybody. So it felt like being in a totally different world. And then, so my first experience of that was really intense. And then I remember within my first month, I was riding I still don't know what this ritual is. And I hope somebody knows, but like there was like, I guess trigger notice in advance. But like there's like semi-loads full of like crates of chickens.
Okay.
And these little kids,
oh no,
yeah, they were like pulling running around, swinging them over their heads, breaking
No,
their necks.
really?
Yeah.
And
it was just a thing. It was like some
That
sort
was what
of
they
ritual
did.
or holiday thing. I was just riding my bike through the neighborhood, and I was like, what in the world is this?
Wow.
So yeah, just as an idea of like one element of culture shock, like just
like I don't see that, and
No.
I didn't see that at Ball State.
no, surely not.
Wow.
So that was a thing. I don't know. It's really hard to try to quantify what was so, and it's just, there's an energy about the whole place too. It's literally buzzing.
It's like intoxicating, just kind of in its own way.
Right. Even like the disparaging aspects of it. It's kind of like, I don't know. Yeah. It's incredible.
I've never been to New York City. I want to go just to say I've gone. I'm not really a big city gal,
Sure.
It's nice to ride into Chicago and then come home and all that, but I don't know. It's fascinating to me. They really paint such a picture in the movies, and then to talk to people like you who've been there that kind of confirm that.
That element of is, I don't know that anything has really captured the realness of what New York is like. I know that as far as the fun, like, part of it, you can't see my hand gestures, but
He's doing the jazz hands.
Jazz hands. Like the merriment aspect of how exciting and lovely New York can be has always been captured well, but I don't know about, maybe I'm sure it has been in some films, but as far as like the average
Right.
thing, it's always like Christmas time and whatever.
Of course it is.
No, but it's like it's also like really dark. For all of that, there is like a complete equal opposite. So I don't know.
So you went out there and you were culture shocked AF, and you went out there for production of musicals.
of this musical, right?
Let's go back to that and talk about that. Were you on
Sure.
Broadway?
Lots of off-Broadway stuff. There was trajectory for that thing to go to Broadway, and it never quite happened. It's real expensive to do that, and I think no matter how competent and wonderful your producers are, it's raising $10 million to put up a show is
significant
right.
amount of
So
cash.
there were a whole bunch of readings. We did a run of it at Goodspeed in Connecticut, and met a lot of cool people there. That's where I met my friend Bobby Hawk, who's the fiddle player that you are aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also around the time that I got my dog. So we found her in the city when we were living in New York. That was part of that time. Yeah, and then just there was a lot of like readings and stuff that were offshoots from whatever musical director knew this person or whatever. So it was kind of, you'd float around that circle, and it was really odd at the time to be. There was enough hype around this thing that I was kind of more of like a background character. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
My buddy and roommate was he like wrote the score. So, and this was kind of it was kind of a weird thing. People were like trying to talk to me to get to him about stuff, and I was like, this is a wild world. So to go from here, and not only going to New York, but going into it in a place where like it was like the to-do people, it was ridiculous, and I feel stupid even talking about it, but it was like going to a place where like every night you're having shrimp cocktail with like Broadway stars, and you're like, I don't know any of these people. But it was that for a little bit, and then so it was and then the whole like the political side of that was something that I experienced. And again, I didn't retain much about people's names or anything like that, but I did it for a little bit, played whatever stuff came my way through that, and then promptly decided to do something else after a minute.
A minute of that, and you've had enough shrimp cocktail for your entire lifetime.
No, I mean, it was fun. Don't get me wrong. I had a blast. But no, it's more so just like it's theater, right? So there's lots of drama.
Always.
And, I prefer a pretty drama-free life.
Yeah.
If I can, I'm doing great. By the way.
If anyone says they want a drama-free life, I would not point them towards theater.
Yeah, or me, to be honest.
Or you.
No.
So you moved on to other things and kind of went and started making your own situation.
Kind of. I mean, it takes time, but that's part of the thing. Is like once we realized that wasn't going to happen, and I was looking around at what I actually wanted to be doing, and finally met the rock and roll kids and the punk rock dudes, and just played in a whole bunch of bands. And I've always kind of had some iteration of a recording studio wherever I've been, and it's been growing over the years, but I had a couple iterations out there that were pretty fun and got to do some really unique, cool work that's ultimately led me to some of my closest friends and that are doing the coolest things now still. And I been fortunate enough to stay in touch with them through whatever we've made out there. So, I don't know. Just been.
What was the name of your...
the studio? Yeah, Dr. Richard's Audio Remedies.
That's what it was. I always think of it as Dr. Dog, even though I know that's not you. But
Dr.
for some
Dog's
reason,
awesome, though.
I always think it's Dr. Dog.
I'll be associated with Dr. Dog.
That's not the same guy, but that's what I always think of. Dr. Richards.
Yeah, Dr. Richards.
So how did that come to be? Why did you call it?
So my brother and I, when social media was new, decided to. We always called each other by like we switched the initials. So like instead of Nick Rapley, I was Rick Napley, and he was Racing Japley, and we just thought it was funny. And so I would meet people for the first time after having social media correspondence, and so they would think my name was Rick, and I just never corrected him because I thought it was pretty funny. And so one of my friends, Ryan Brewer, who I play with now, he lives in Indianapolis, or like Anderson, Indiana. And he just called me Richard all the time. And then first he knew me as a drummer, and then as an audio engineer, and as whatever else. And he was like, okay, fine, Dr. Richard M. Napley III, Esquire. So that was his full nickname for me. And then he was the one that came up with the idea for the studio to be called Dr. Richard's Audio Remedies. So I thought that was pretty cute, and I kept it.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I always love hearing how people come up with their names. And I love that started out as like a social media thing. Like Joe on social media is Sergi Joe. And he always knows exactly who knows him in real life and who knows him from social media.
Because they're like, Serge.
A lot of people call him Serge.
That's awesome.
He's Serge. And he's like, yeah, it's cool. It's cooler than Joe. So we just go with it.
Absolutely.
And now here you
there
are, Dr. Richard.
Yeah, see, I got too many names.
Not enough names, in my opinion.
Names. Okay, well, we can come up with more.
Well, we are here on WVLP 103.1 talking to Dr. Richard, Nick Rapley, Rick Napley, and who, I don't even know. Who else are you?
There's one more currently. There's that Bridge Williams fella.
Oh, Bridge. Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue to talk a little bit about him, huh?
Sure. So, at one point or another, I typically have not been into like Americana music all that much, but there was a point where that changed. I think once I hit 30 and listened to Tom Petty with Different Light, I was like, oh, I get it now. Mm-hmm. So that started to kind of turn into a thing, and I kept getting tapped on the shoulder to write these country songs. And I was also going through started therapy and all this other stuff, and was really thinking about, I don't know, I was getting to the middle of things. So I was writing a lot of songs kind of through that approach, and it occurred to me at one point or another that when I was born, my dad wanted to name me Bridge because there was a guy that worked for him that he was inspired by, or at least appreciated enough to want to do that. And my mom didn't think that was a real name, so she vetoed it for Nick. And then over the course of all this time with the whole Americana music and therapy, and my grandmother was passing, and I was living with her while that was going on and stayed with her as it happened, and then inherited that house, and their last name is Williams. Mm-hmm. So I thought and through that whole experience kind of gave me a new beginning in life. And so I kind of felt like my inherited, I was intent, like the coolest connection I can have with my dad is him to have the foresight to think about a spiritual connection with somebody to name me after. And that's not normally like how he and I connect. So I thought that was kind of a beautiful thing. So I was like, okay, Bridge. And then Williams is like the life I've inherited. So through that, it kind of gave me permission to write music that I normally wouldn't, because I had a whole new sense of self that was involved in it. So that's that.
BRIDJ.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Bridge. And I had the pleasure of seeing a performance of Bridge Williams at the Chicago Street Theater.
Yes, and there will be some video released of that.
Oh.
I'm not sure how soon, to be honest, but
at
probably in the
some
spring.
Point. Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So Bridge Williams is born.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened after you moved back here from
Correct.
New York.
Correct.
So let's rewind the timeline
Sure.
a little bit, and
Okay.
let's kind of get to that transition time. We were in the COVID world, right?
Yeah, the height of it. It was pretty nuts. So I learned pretty quickly when I got back that the COVID experience here was nothing like the COVID experience I had in New York City.
Yeah.
So at the time that it was happening, I mean, I relied entirely on public transit. Mm-hmm. And so you go from that to being in a situation where you have this airborne disease that nobody knows what the heck it does, or all we know people are dying. And out there, a lot of people were dying, actually.
Right, yeah.
And so it was kind of like I couldn't go anywhere aside from like the places that were in my neighborhood, or if I rode my bike or whatever. And you had this totally dystopian feeling where it was like the grocery store. It was like interesting even because there'd be like a line that would go 3 or 4 city blocks, and everybody was 6 feet apart, and they'd let like 10 people in at a time, and everybody had to have full mask and gloves, and all that kind of just. And it also went from everything being extremely busy all the time to like nothing. The contrast was crazy. And I remember at one point having a conversation with my brother, and he found out, they were having kids, and it was looking scary to the point where he was like, hey man, I think you need to come home. And so in the process of getting a U-Haul, the closest one I could find was a 3.5-hour bike ride into New Jersey. Apparently, mostly because all of the U-Hauls that were in the city were outside of funeral homes storing corpses.
Oh.
So.
Well, that's a nice thing.
Yeah. So that whole thing, it was time to go.
Yeah.
So got the U-Haul. I spent a solid month kind of processing and packing up. It was I had intended, once I made the decision, I was like ready to go, but I realized how much work it was actually to move my life and escape. So got it all together, did the whole cross-country drive, washing hands at the gas pumps and trying not to touch anything. And then I remember getting home and my family, we all unloaded everything, and then everything got sanitized and wiped down, and I went and quarantined at our little lake cottage for a couple weeks. So yeah, it was kind of crazy. I remember that bike ride to the U-Haul was a very emotional experience because I had to go through over the Brooklyn Bridge and all through Manhattan and go see like what I thought might be for the very last time all of these things that I fell in love with. So it was kind of a crazy experience. And I don't know. Yeah, it's almost like it's weird to think about at this point. But so yeah, that was getting back, and then I moved in with my dad and grappling with being as an adult, as a 33-year-old moving in with your dad. Love him, but
I did it too. Not at 33, but I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then so my first job back was at like Home Depot for a while, and my manager was a man by the name of Rudy Delia, who's a really cool guy, and I found out that he was like was writing songs and stuff like that, and then he had heard that I was doing some music stuff, and so we got together and recorded a song for him. And at the time that I'd found out that we just finished it, and he was like, "Oh man, this is great." And he's like, "Also, I have a tenant that just moved out of this house downtown, and I was thinking maybe you put your studio there, see what you think." So that was my first kind of introduction to Valpo, kind of opening itself back up to me and welcoming me back home. And I had this really cool house on Locust Street for a while, and that was the first iteration of my studio here. And I got to really kind of start to get a sense of the community here and meeting people and seeing. And that's where Paul came through, and we recorded Couch Musings in that studio, and that was super fun.
Cool.
And it was also like right behind the alley of front porch, so I felt like immediately after getting back, it was like, okay, cool, like I belong here. So that was cool.
In your little corner of the world. Welcome home.
Exactly.
Was that right away in 2020, or was this in 2021?
Might have been like 2021, I think. Okay. So I also worked at Stone Baker Pizza for a while too. I was driving. I'm not sure if she still has the trucks or not, but I used to drive a Studebaker around, and
nice.
Yeah, that was fun.
That's a fun one. So you're home. You got your studio on Locust. You're connected to front porch. You got hooked up with Paul. Everything is great. What happens next?
I mean, lots of personal things, like just relationship changes, all that good stuff happening, of course, as it does. And I guess in the studio, folks, there's just again, like meeting people that had a big impact on being a member of things. I can't think of, oh shoot, there's so much. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so while all this is going on, there's still like my New York friends are still doing things. There's an artist by the name of Lizzie No who's out there. And so also while I've been back, I've been touring with her occasionally. So it'd be out for a month this or then, and then just traveling and getting to play drums, which is great. Had the studio going. And then I think I made it at that spot for like 2.5, maybe 3 years. And while I was there, through some work that I was doing, I met Isaiah Vargas, who's also a front porch teacher, and then we ended up starting a band together from that, and he moved in and we were roommates, so that was a cool thing, kind of out of the blue. There was a band called Mindfully Blind that I had in, and they were really, really young, and they like kind of broke in that house, so we had 2 weeks straight, and I think they were maybe like 20 or 21 at the time, and so there's how many other ones? 5 of them. So they were living there for 2 weeks. So it was like a whole thing. But they brought Isaiah in for one session, and we ended up just really having fun working together. And then he was going to go off to college, and he ended up not. And I was looking at my bills, and I was going, "Hey, buddy." So he ended up moving in, and then it was kind of one of those situations where you wake up in the morning and there'd be some beautiful piano playing coming from the studio, and so then you just kind of like sip your coffee and go sit and play drums with them or whatever, and all of this stuff kind of started accumulating around that. So it was really kind of a beautiful organic thing.
That is fascinating. And all the while you're not doing music full time, like you're working in other ways, like working
well, sure. So like I I'd always kind of maintained. So I was like driving for Jimmy John's for a little bit while I was doing that. So I always kind of split up time, like doing like a few lessons and then studio work, out gigging, but none of it was really consistent or anything like that. So there's always been something to kind of like help support it. And then after a period of time, I was approached to do some work with the Boys and Girls Club. And then I was there for about like a year and a half in total, working on a music and recording program. And it was a lot of fun. And it was really kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different things, just working with kids and seeing how they learn and honestly, too, the power that music has to really help open a person up and change their perspective.
That's fascinating. I love the Boys and Girls Club. My kids go to the Boys and Girls Club.
Oh, that's right.
I wish you were still there because Juliana's in violin and stuff, so she totally would have jammed with you.
There's another great guy there now who's Roberto Carpaccio, and he's got like an incredible salsa band, and Isaiah and I were kind of jamming with him for a while too, but he's over there now.
Cool.
So you should have him ask about Roberto.
I will. She had mentioned there's someone there that had kind of facilitated some sort of a music room of sorts for them, and she was kind of jamming with some of the older musicians there and kind of learning some cool tricks, which I love that. Like, I think that's probably one of my favorite things just about music is the way that the community kind of happens. And
sure.
And that's exactly what it is. It just kind of happens. And
right.
Then you learn things from some people and people learn things from you and you kind of go in and out and
right.
circumstances occur.
Music is
cool.
a very interesting catalyst for bringing together like unique people.
It really is. Now, the reason that I was asking about like your work and why you weren't doing it full time is because I feel like there's a lot of people out there who aspire to be full-time musicians and really want to do it, and a lot of people that are doing it, and there's that whole starving artist side to it,
sure.
Of course. And so I don't know. What are your thoughts on going full time and really pursuing your passion?
Well,
and as Isaiah would say, your passion. I interviewed him a while back.
Yes.
And pursuing that and really, really giving it 110% versus still giving it as much as you can while working on maintaining kind of a lifestyle. I guess to say.
Well, I think if you're pursuing your passion out of the sake of the art and your love for it and not necessarily focused on making a living, I feel like there's a choice, right? Like you can, particularly in this area or in the region, if you're pursuing music as a job, then you're probably not, it's probably not as creative of a thing. Just by the nature, I don't want to insult anyone, but I feel like most of the gigs that are to be had are for solo acoustic acts that want to play for 3 hours at a restaurant, or if you want to cover another band's music, then you can get paid to play a venue around here. But as far as original music, pursuing that as any way to make money, particularly around here, is laughable at the least. So I think it's if I'm more focused on just enjoying the process of making things and helping other people make things and choosing projects that light me up and allow me to feel creative. And if I have to work another job to support that, then I'm all for it because that's just where I would rather be. That being said, if there's opportunities to create more space for original music or more creative things, I'm always encouraging of that and looking for ways to kind of do it. But I'm also not necessarily no neg on myself, but I'm not necessarily the biggest go-getter when it comes to making things happen on a community level. But I've tried to do some things and I'm definitely interested and happy to facilitate and help in any way that I can. And I think having a studio has been good for that, just because it's nice to have some sort of hub where people can at least learn that each other exist. And I know that there's some obvious staples in town of folks that are doing their thing, but there's also a lot more musicians around that are making things that don't know about each other and are doing really interesting things that are not being heard. And I know there's certainly a lot of folks that are aiming to help with that, Ed Contreras, the Tiki Man radio station.
Love that guy.
They're great, and they're always looking to promote and get people heard and just share local music. So kudos to y'all. Thanks. And I think it's just also like there's not really a space that's dedicated to it, and so there's ideas about what to do or where you can rent things, and then it's also interesting some of the red tape that's around some stuff. No matter like how connected or whatever you might be, it's still just there's just like an assumption of how things are supposed to go, and it's kind of gate kept based on that. So it seems.
Yeah. Why do you think it is? Why do you think it is that way? Like we've got these places in New York, I'm sure, and Nashville, like in some of these other big places, I'm sure you can get tons of original music in Chicago or other areas. And here in Northwest Indiana in particular, I have found that there's incredible amounts of talent. There are incredibly talented people, and there are a lot of them. And yet, it seems like there's nowhere for them to go, and no clear path or desire really from the community maybe to facilitate such a thing. Like, why is that?
Well, I wish if we had the answers, then it'd be easier to fix it. But I think it's just the expectation of like what it's just been kind of set up that way. It's like this is what you've been presented with. This is what we know you're gonna. It's like it's the whole thing. Like we have a guarantee with this that whatever event we're going to do, we're gonna be able to get people there because they know what this is, and I can respect that. It works. But as far like there's not like a place that is at least in the immediacy of town. I mean, sure, there's venues, of course. There's Front Porch Music is doing stuff there, but as far as like anything that's a size up from that or level up from that, I know there's stuff around, but you got to go to like Hammond, and I've seen some cool DIY stuff that kids are doing, and there's a whole like raging scene out there.
Cool.
But there's nothing that's really, at least as far as I'm concerned, anything that's going to happen has to be from community level up. I don't see anything from the top down that has any incentive for them to want to do that. It just seems like there's the arts or something. It's cool to say that you support by, and they do in their own way, but it's not necessarily in a way that supports a community of artists. It's like, I just would like to see less outsourced maybe in that standpoint, where it's like, okay, yeah, you could do a cover band from Chicago, or you could have these kids that are later have a sick band play half original stuff and half that. And I don't know. I understand all the reasons on both ends of it, but I do think there needs to be something that and I know I had some success with Chicago Street Theater. Just they're great, and they're really open to and willing to put on original music concert series and things like that, and they have been for a long time, but it hasn't been something I feel like that's been really pushed home to the degree that it could be. And it's one of the few places around that I'm seeing like a lot of potential in right now that's has their door open to it. So I don't know if there is anybody out there who's looking to maybe do some sort of venue, or there's Verona Pizza and stuff like that, but I mean, as far as like a listening room, like a concert where you're going to go,
right. You go to experience.
Exactly, as opposed to just drinking and having music in the background. And so I think to your original question, like, yeah, that's, if you want to make money here, go gig and play covers and be there to support people drinking.
Right. So, it's such an interesting thing, because like I was saying, there's so many talented people, and I'm sure there's some wonderfully talented people that are listening to this now and maybe kind of feeling a little discouraged, like, well, what's the point of even pursuing creating my own art if there's nowhere that's going to facilitate it anyway? So I might as well just go and learn these Tom Petty riffs and go play this gig and never realize my potential. Like, what would you say to somebody who is listening now, or even to like younger Nick or anybody that is a talented individual with a lot of opportunity and potential, but like, where do they go with that? What should they do?
Well, I think if you're really doing the thing and you love doing it, you're going to do it regardless, first and foremost. So just like trust yourself to keep doing it, even if you get discouraged. And also, secondly, nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know what? I'm just going to put this down for a minute and learn some Petty covers and go play tunes. Inevitably, you're going to be pulled back into a situation where you're going to feel compelled to make your own. And it's just reminding that the fun is in the making and what you learn about yourself through the process. And like, once it's done, it's really hard to not care once it's done, want to have it be heard by whoever. And it's always a struggle for any artist that I've ever met. It's, if you're making something, of course, there's some ego attachment to it. And you try to remove that as much as you can and just enjoy the process of it. When it's done, keep making things. It's a lesson that I still have to learn all the time. And especially when it comes to, if once you've made something, then you have to make the decision, okay, like I'm putting it out into the world now, but the amount of effort that it takes to do that and promote it to the point where it can be heard, you really have to shift gears and be completely ego driven in order to get it done, especially if you don't have a team of people to help you do it. So that's the phase that I'm in now, and I grapple with it a lot in terms of like how because I would love to just be like, let me just put this here and drop it and maybe no one hears it and that's fine. But that's just, I need to practice the art of releasing music. It's a whole separate game now too. So I guess also don't get discouraged by that. And I think a lot of the younger kids are probably more into that than they are the creating of, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting.
What is interesting, especially in this next generation of creatives, because for our generation, it was, I mean, good luck getting any sort of recording. Like, you had to really kind of know and get into it and figure out what you're going to do and kind of jerry rig some things sometimes and put stuff together with duct tape and just like figure it out and get the material. Now, everyone's phone comes with GarageBand. You can literally just write and record and mix and master stuff in 10 minutes on your phone, and AI can write your lyrics, and it's like, it's so easy to do and everybody's doing it, and now it's like so over, it's just full of, it's so easy to do. But what's difficult to do is to make really good music, right?
I mean, the thing that I appreciate about this, and I'm trying to get out my old fogey way of thinking about it, you know,
the old
like
millennial.
Yeah, like, but we are, but also not. Just the fact that it is easy to make music also means it's easier to communicate your feelings with others. And I suppose you still have to practice doing it in order to get your desired result. So there's still, and honestly, like, that's a whole skill set to do it the way contemporary people are making music. I don't have that skill set. Like, I haven't done it. I'm like, it probably takes me 10 times as long to do the same thing that they do in 5 minutes. And that's the thing that I'm recognizing about a lot of the tools that music stuff is providing. It's like taking the barrier away to immediate creation, which is something that we've always been trying to do. And I'm not going to like rest on my laurels of being like, oh, well, I actually, you know, I used to splice tape. Like, who cares? Nobody cares.
Right.
Well, does it sound good? Cool. Can I listen to it? Can I enjoy it? Does it make me feel something? Great. So I think the access to tools that allow more people to create, great. I mean, like, the other thing is the way that it is, I don't feel like they're going to be taking anything from me, because there's not much to be had in that regard anyway, unless you're in a very specific place. So I think it's cool that it frees us all up to just make things, and I hope that that's the way we approach it. And so, and also, if you're like fearful about it, like, what are you worried about? Just make stuff. Like, right.
So you kind of are more of like, let's just throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks? Or is it more like, let's make the best darn plate of spaghetti that anyone's ever had, and I'm not going to give it to anybody until I know this recipe is perfected?
I mean, yes, I kind of have to. I've got multiple things going where some of them are very much like, this is going to be the perfect plate of spaghetti, and this other one's, it's, you know what, I got these ingredients, can't really screw it up too bad, let's go for it. And so, and in a lot of ways, I mean, they inform each other, but having a project that you really don't have, that's kind of wild on purpose and allows you to kind of relax and just really not think about trying to make something great, and just making what comes out of you organically, hopefully from a place of joy or whatever emotion you're experiencing. And it is what it is. That to me has been far more rewarding currently than laboring over something very intensively to make something that's perfect, because I feel like it's perfect to my taste, to somebody else's taste. And like I've done so many things like that, and those are the ones I usually end up holding back the most. And I think there's something crippling about, I think it's awesome to be like, to have an intention to make something delicious, regardless of what that means. And maybe not looking to be perfect, but as long as I know it's going to be delicious. It might be way too much salt, but in that moment, it tastes real good. So it's kind of like That's the way I'm looking at it now.
Excellent analogy. I liked that.
Food relates to everything.
It always does, especially for me, as I'm always cooking stuff.
You are an excellent cook, by the way.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy the chicken and noodles.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Yeah, come on my show and get a home cooked meal.
Yeah, I highly recommend it to everybody. Do that.
The Hannah Trueblood restaurant. Mm-hmm.
When is it opening?
It's 24 hours. Just
24. Okay.
come over and get a bowl. Don't do that.
Yeah, you just advertise that to.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't come to my house at 3 a.m. asking for a bowl of chicken and noodles. Like 3 p.m. maybe, but not 3 a.m. So yeah, one more thing that I want to ask you.
Okay.
Is this is about like kind of like that AI situation that
Sure.
I had just mentioned, how it's so accessible and music is so easy for people to kind of come and put this together. There's some tension in the music industry about the whole AI and its use and people creating AI music and how it's going to potentially just destroy music in general. And the analog skill is gone now and no one cares about that. No one's going to use that anymore. Now that's a lost craft. That's like the fully
Sure.
that's like the full other side of the spectrum, idea of that, of
Right.
like the doom and gloom of AI coming and ruining music for good because everything sounds like a washed out pop song now.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, look, I admit it's like scary to a degree where the biggest repercussions for me are like when an artist is imitated using AI to make music that's not their music and that is fake and people not being able to tell the difference. Like that's something that I feel like is kind of damaging. As far and I just feel like the use of it is almost more for like it's for entertainment's sake anyway, which I know music is I guess supposed to be, but also it's like I don't see it being used, at least initially, as anything other than like, I don't know, there's commercial music, right? So like maybe like a Chevy commercial won't want to pay an artist, so they'll just do that. But I don't know. It's hard to say because I know there's a lot of artists that have blown up because of getting like some sync right stuff. So it like really kind of prevents some of that. But also I think about the type of music that a lot of that is it music that people want to make anyway at this point. So I'm hoping that there will be a response from listeners to want to hear something more organic after the fact and hear something that's more human. So hopefully we're going to start hearing a lot more weird music. And I think there's so much access to all kinds of different stuff. And most of the younger people I've met are listening to like a wide variety of really eclectic things. And it kind of blows my mind. So like, I'm not really worried about what the future of music ends up being as far as AI's influence on it. Like, whatever. I mean, it will become harder and harder to tell. And I know that like I have a friend who was like really terrified. He was playing around with it, and I have to admit, like some of the stuff he made with it was kind of mind blowing. Just because it's like, I think of it this way too. The way it simplifies things, it's like okay, it's pulling from the entire history of recorded music to make something from.
Right.
So the idea of even needing to search for samples is like ridiculous. You're like, okay, like you could type in like funkadelic drum pattern and it'll pull up like some old, it's insane. And you have a ready-made produced song in like 30 seconds. So the other thing that I could see this as a use for is like, let's say you're having a hard time writing a song and you can use AI to build and produce it for you as a demo.
Right.
And work backwards from that. So I look at it, all these things that are taking the steps out of music making. So like some people could complain like, well, you're not literate at music anymore. You don't really know how this stuff works. I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to be. So instead I can just get straight to the message and get straight to like, it's like an idea machine is the way that I'm looking at all of this. And like instruments, I think are going to start to be simplified too, where it's like you just know a few buttons that kind of take you to the space of the thing, and then you work backwards from there. And it's like, okay, great, here's ideas. And then hopefully, but I also don't think there's any lack of interest in learning to play instruments or in every youthful kid I've seen, like still the tactile experience of playing something is really exciting, and it's fun to know that you can physically manipulate something and it changes the way everything in the room feels. That's never going to go away. And so I feel like the combination and the marriage of it just means like hopefully that music will progress in a way that becomes interesting, that we don't this is obviously a very optimistic approach, but
I love it.
Yes, I think we have to kind of embrace it and use it to our advantage.
I agree with you on that. I mean, they kind of say the same thing about, like, in my field in real estate, like when they came out with like Zillow. I mean, that was supposed to end realtors forever. You know, no one needs a realtor anymore because you can just look at homes on the internet and you can do everything. But now I feel like, well, statistically speaking, more people than ever are using real estate agents than they ever were before, which means that technology and that accessibility is so overwhelming to the consumer that our service is more valuable and more useful than it ever was before, because we can navigate through all that nonsense and we can kind of help you with that whole thing. It's not just like some computer doing all of the stops. Like, that's cool, good for you if you're going to utilize that. But at the end of the day, nothing is going to replace an acoustic guitar. Nothing is going to replace the Ludwig drums. Like,
and I think to like your point with that too, it's like almost the digital aspect of it gives you a much quicker bird's eye view of the market, or I don't know in which ways it helps dictate what that is too, which there could be some ups and downs to that, but it does make that, like you're saying, that the need for the human element more, and the music is based around human connection. So there's a point where, I don't know, I think about things I miss with video games. Like, I don't even play video games, but I think back to the time that you could sit in front of the same console with your brother or with your friend and not need to have two separate consoles connected to the internet. And you could play the same game on one machine and be together and still be like in the digital world. Like, but like the two were married, and now it's so the thing that I hope doesn't disappear is the communal element of making music, because it's just different, right? Because it's all shared online. I was thinking, all my friends have kids. I'm the only one that doesn't. So they were talking about like their kids' social interactions being like how they're all online. They don't play together in IRL.
Right.
And I always wonder, I'm like, well, okay, so some of the games they're doing online are still physically active, and they're hanging out. And I'm like, is it, like, I don't know how to judge what actually is beneficial or not, thinking about, okay, what's the difference of me like sitting in my room playing guitar all day versus a kid who's playing, you know, I mean, I don't know.
It's an interesting thought. I struggle with it myself because I'm always like, get off your thing, like go outside, like here's a football, like go do something, like go find your friends at the park, like go out in the real world. Like when I was a kid, back in my day, but realistically, like 9 times out of 10, I was sitting in my room on the corded phone, twiddling my thumbs and like with my friend on speakerphone, like not even saying anything to her. And she's just there and I'm just doing it. Like we would call each other and we would watch Monsters Inc. together. Like we would both put the DVD in and we would both watch it at our house. Like kids have always done that.
Exactly.
And that's just kind of, it's a different way of doing it now. And I got to be okay with that with my kids.
Well, it's a challenging thing because it's like you do still want.
It is. I don't want them to rot their brains out online, but at the same time, I definitely rotted my brain out on Neopets and I turned out pretty okay.
And it's just it's a different, it's honestly like a different world than when we were kids.
Completely different. With that, would you recommend everybody's kids pick up an instrument? Like, you know, it's the holiday season. Like, what are we getting everybody for presents? Should we be getting kids like instruments at a young age and just get them going?
Sure. I think like a cajon is a really cool thing for anyone who's aspiring percussionist. It's a little box you sit on, but it's got a bunch of different sounds, and you can really explore that very quickly. And I think that's a good one for anyone who seems like a young percussionist. Ukuleles are always cool because they're like just a lovely open tuning anyway, and so you can just strum them and you're making music. So those are two that I always recommend. Piano is always good. Absolutely, and like allowing kids to explore it in their own terms is a really neat thing too, because it's obviously get your kids lessons if they seem like they want to, but I think it's totally okay to have instruments around that are maybe not even played correctly, as long as they're being played.
Just being played.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. You never know what that's going to inspire.
Right. Well, what age do you recommend that people start doing lessons? Like, you can pick up a maraca when you're 2.
Sure.
But when do you really want to start?
it depends on the kid. Some are like really like I have some kids that are really young that are like zeroed in. I mean, not really any kid is zeroed in, but you know what I mean. Like they're
zeroed-ish.
Yeah, like they really gravitate to points where they want to progress.
Right.
And there's others who really just like playing and the whole, and that's at the end of the day, yes. So I mean, 4 to 6 can be a thing. I'm usually like 6 or 7's probably by then you have a good indication. But if you have instruments around prior to then, they'll definitely gravitate towards something if it's what they want to do. And I think it's just as an option. I think even people that I know that are not like musicians, that are either athletes or maybe they have some other job, like what music provides, to be able to come home and play a guitar at the end of the day or whatever, to give you something else to focus on that brings you joy or a sense of accomplishment. So I think it's a good thing as a tool to have in life, regardless of what you do. I
love that. So where can they find you? Because you do lessons, right?
Yeah, I do lessons. So I do like kind of intro piano, intro guitar, and I'll go up to advanced on drum lessons. So I guess just on Facebook you can find me, just Nick Rapley. Instagram, I'm on there, I think, as Bridge Williams currently. Just feel free to reach out. I don't really advertise much of what I do. I kind of like to operate on community and organic connections. So same with the studio. If anybody's out there and wants to give the gift of a recording session, you can always give me a holler. I'd love to meet you and talk about what you're wanting to do. And I've done a lot of cool stuff with local bands around here, and I hope to do more. So
yeah, what's your favorite genre to work with?
I like a lot of things. Anything that's like retro soul or like funk. I like doing pop stuff as well, or if you want to get crazy and do some punk stuff or some hard rock. I like it all. Jazz, Latin.
You got it all. And in your amazing studio.
It's pretty cool.
I got to come and see it soon. I still haven't come to see it.
I know.
We got to come play.
Yes.
It's like a playground. Is the way that you've described it to me.
It feels like that. I mean, it's like this is my grandparents' house, and they had like an old. Everything is like basically from the '60s. It's a time capsule. So there's a pinball machine down there, an old pool table, ping pong, and then of course like all the things that go in a recording studio. So and there's a bar. There's a little tiki bar in there.
Very good. Good. So we'll whip up some cocktails and whip up some epic
jams.
Funkadelic metal country.
Funkadelic metal country.
It's going to be the new thing.
What's going to be the name of the first song?
Let's see. So Funkadelic metal country. I would say Killer Fords.
Killer Fords. Okay.
Help me.
It's a tough one. I put you on the spot hard. Let's see. Psychedelic Killer AI Fords.
There we go. And this is the you heard it here first, folks. The metal. I already forgot what it was.
That's okay.
Metal country punk folk.
It's a micro genre that is all genres.
It is all genres and also no genres.
Genreless.
You just wouldn't understand.
No. I don't even understand.
And with that, it is 8:01. So this has been an incredibly interesting conversation, as I knew it would be. Thank you so much for being here, Nick. Why don't you tell everybody one more time where they can find you?
Sure. Yeah, Facebook at Nick Rapley, Rapley, and on Instagram at BridgeWilliams. Bridge Williams.
Beautiful. And I'm Hannah Trueblood. This is Conversations, WVLP 103.1. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoyed this musical escapade of genres and all sorts of things. And please go follow Nick and support all of the local music, because they really do make the world go round. And we love our local musicians and our local artists, and they really deserve all of the shout outs in the world. So thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful night, and we will see you next time.